Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Lovey Brown Bonner, and
I'm Sandra Lane.
this afternoon we will be interviewing General
Gerald Peacock.
Peacock. Can you please spell your first name for me?
Gerald, Gerald.
No.
Middle name is Rees, Rees. Last name is Peacock, Peacock. That's a very British name.
Fine.
Well, we have a few questions we would like to ask you. It says that you were in two types of
Services.
services,
Yes.
and it says that you were in the U.S. Air Force and the Merchant Marines. Can you tell us a little more about each one of those, please?
Well, the Merchant Marine was the organization that got supplies to the battlefield, mostly to England, and our ships went back and forth to England. We were technically not a part of the military, but we lost, percentage-wise, we lost more people in the Merchant Marine than any other service, percentage-wise, because the German U-boats were sinking the ships one right after another, and it was, I didn't realize, I was young and wanted to fight for my country, and I didn't realize how much danger we were in, but we never got hit, and a lot of them did.
So, for the Merchant Marines, did you decide to go over there, or did you automatically were drafted?
I decided to do that on my own. I made the decision to get into the Merchant Marine.
So what prompted you, or why were you determined to go to the Merchant
Well,
Marines?
the World War II was still going on, even though it was starting to wind down, and I just liked the Merchant Marine. I liked the water, I liked the ships, and so I did that in the Merchant Marine.
Can you tell me what were some of your experiences as you were in the Merchant Marines?
Well, I was below deck almost all the time. I was in the engine room, and I was an engineer to keep the engine running. And we were running Liberty ships at that time, which had just one triple expansion steam engine, and the steam would go from the boiler to the small cylinder to the next size cylinder and then to the big one. And there's no gearing whatsoever. The propeller was bolted directly through a shaft to the engine. If you wanted to back it up, you just stop the engine and start it in the other direction.
It says that you were in ROTC in 1953. What college did you go to?
I went to Bradley University right here in Peoria.
Do you have any experiences from that program that you'd like to share?
I beg your pardon?
Do you have any experience from that program you would like to share?
Well, yes. We had an ROTC unit at Bradley, and I've always been fond of the military. And the Merchant Marine was history. The war was over, and I got out and came home. And I've always liked flying. When I was a little boy, my father took me for a ride in a Ford Trimotor. And that's a long time back, 3 engines, and they did what they call barnstorming. They'd fly around the country and land in some farmer's oat field, and then people would come running to see the airplane, and they'd sell rides on it. They'd give rides. My dad bought my brother and I a ticket to ride on that, and as soon as we got in the air, I thought the thing had stopped because there were no telephone poles going by. And I just made a determination right then, I'm going to do this.
Can you explain to us what the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award is?
Yes, I can. It's a very coveted award, and there are very few of them given out. And it's a plaque and a recognition of many things, but the 3 major ones are: you have to have been flying as a pilot for more than 50 consecutive years. And the next requirement is that you could never have had an accident. And third is you could never have violated a federal air regulation. If I have violated a federal air regulation, at least they're not aware of it. And I can show you the plaque if you'd like to see it. It's,
Absolutely, that would be great.
mhm.
It says you were in the Strategic Air Command. Can you explain to us a little bit about that?
I beg your pardon?
The Strategic Air Command?
Yes, I was in the Strategic Air Command. I went through single-engine jet pilot training program, became quite proficient in the F-80. The F-80 is a jet engine, had the J-33 centrifugal flow engine, which wasn't all that efficient by today's standards, but it was still a good engine. And you could hit the sound barrier with it, and the highest I ever had one was 47,500 feet. And then we were assigned, after the pilot training, we were assigned a base of our choice. And I made a very intelligent decision. I picked a base that was the closest to Peoria. That was Whiteman Air Force Base. And so then I arrived at Whiteman, and the whole squadron, the 340th Bomb Wing, was overseas at the time, and I was all by myself there for a couple of weeks. And then the squadron all came back, and I was assigned to a B-47 squadron. The B-47 is a one-bomb airplane. It's the atomic bomb, and one is all you need. And then they came out with a retainability rule. Unless you had so much time to spend in the Air Force, you'd have to be put back into, not back, but transferred into a support squadron. And the tanker squadron was a support squadron, so then I was reassigned to tankers and flew tankers doing mid-air refueling the rest of the time I was in the Air Force.
How did you adapt to military life?
Beg your pardon?
How did you, I say it like this. When you got in the military, how did you adapt to military life?
I loved it. I dearly loved it. If I had been single when I went into the Air Force, they'd had to shoot me to get me out of the Air Force. I'd have stayed forever, really. I had no complaints at all. Even the food was good.
Did you make any friends?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. I have many, many, many friends from the Air Force that we've kept track of. There was a group that was called the Famous Fighting Five, and I have the privilege of being one of that five. And all five of us are still living. And I just recently came from a Air Force reunion, a B-47 reunion in Tucson, Arizona. And 4 out of the 5 of us were there. And it's a great bond of fellowship. Every one of those guys would give his life for you. That's the bond that's there. A lot of people wanted to go into things like a training command. I have a friend who doesn't live too far from here. He went into the training command and became a flight instructor. But with a flight instructor, you gain some friends, and then they rotate. About every 6 weeks they rotate, and you have 4 more and 4 more and 4 more. You never really get to know anybody. I wanted to be in a combat outfit, and that's what I did, and I never regretted it, because you make friendships and fellowship that will never end.
When you were in the military, how did you stay in contact with your friends and family? Well, besides home-wise.
Now, you mean?
No, I'm saying when you were in the military, how did you stay in contact with your family while you were gone?
Well, we had a certain amount of leave, and every time we had leave, we'd come home. And Whiteman Air Force Base is about 75 or 80 miles southeast of Kansas City, and you could drive that in about 8 hours. So anytime I got free, I always came home.
Sir, when you were in the Merchant Marines and deployed overseas, what was your ability to contact people here, if any?
Little to none.
Little to none. Any letters?
Yeah, mail was about the only.
Sure. Any of them that you remember specifically that meant something to you at the time?
Well, I think they all meant something to me. I would get letters from my parents and
Sure.
tell me how my dog was doing. And my dog passed away while I was in the Merchant Marine and came home and he was gone. And I had a wonderful set of parents. My dad was a real gentleman and my mother was a lady. And I'm very thankful for that. And mail was about the only kind. My dad sent my saxophone to New York so I could play in the Merchant Marine Band. And that didn't last long because it was shipped out and that was the end of that. But I have a background in music. My mother was a music teacher. And that is her piano right there. It's about 110 years old and still is in perfect condition. And anyhow, she taught me a lot about music, and it ruined my life because I now know what good music is, and I'm not hearing much of it anymore. But that was about the only contact we had was by mail.
Do you remember how long delays were in getting mail? An example would be maybe they wrote you, a letter that, was in October, but you didn't actually, get to see it for...
Oh, sometimes it was weeks, like
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And, but they always seemed to get there.
Yeah.
But it's slow, but they got there. And the same writing back, you'd write a letter and mail it, and it might have been on the ship for who knows how long. And eventually it would get into the mail system. We didn't have cell phones back in those days.
None of those.
You mentioned the famous Fighting Five. Could you tell us more about that?
Well, somebody asked me why we were called the famous Fighting Five, and the only answer I had is because we survived. And a lot of guys didn't. There's a subject I probably won't get into, but the worst combat I was in was the Cold War with Russia. And that's something the government never talked about. And they will deny it yet today, but it was real. I was there. I did it. And we were assigned the job of photographing Russia. The Russians got a little moody about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time I had moved out of the B-47s into the tankers, which was a Boeing 377, just like the one behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really, really long story, but our military intelligence said that it would be perfectly safe over Russia because a MiG-15 can't catch a B-47. We got over there, they had MiG-17s and they would catch a B-47. They just shot us to pieces. We shot down 2 of our B-47s. They went in the North Sea with 6 wonderful guys, and another one was all shot to pieces, but made it home. It's a long, long story. That's about a half-hour story, but that was bad. Do you remember the guy that took our place? We got our nose bloodied really bad in that war with Russia, Cold War they called it. And the guy that took our place was, I think of his name, he was flying a U-2 at 80,000 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I can't think of his name. And he was told that the Russians didn't have a missile that would go that high. Guess what? They did have a missile that would go that high, and they shot him down. the Russians fired 6 missiles at them, and they sent up a chase plane. And one of the missiles hit their own chase plane, and blew that up. And Powers, Gary Francis Powers, and he bailed out at 80,000 feet. And the airplane came down relatively intact. And the Russians got the film and everything, and our government denied it. And they had to eat crow and say, well, we were actually doing it. And then it's my understanding they finished the job with the SR-71. And they'll run between 3,000 and 4,000 miles an hour. And as far as I know, nothing's ever caught one of those yet.
Yeah. Where were you based out of during the Cold War time that you're describing?
Whiteman.
You were at Whiteman at that time too.
And I tell people we spent one night up at Thule Air Force Base at the North Pole.
Yeah, I know where that's at.
However, the nights are 6 months long and the
Live
days
there.
are 6 months long.
Yeah.
Only one night, one day a year.
Yeah.
And so I was up there for 6 months, all in the wintertime. The temperature got down to 70 below zero. And on those airplanes at 70 below zero, everything leaks. I don't care what it is, it leaks.
Right.
Fuel leaks, oil leaks, everything. And we use the North Pole as a rendezvous point for refueling B-47s and B-52s. And our navigators had a sense of humor because every time we'd fly right over the North Pole, the navigator would call you up and say, well, take up a heading of south. At the North Pole, every direction is south.
Right.
And the weather got so bad up there in what we call whiteouts, blowing snow, that you couldn't see, from here to that light, and absolutely storm blind. We had land airplanes in that. It was all done by GCA, ground control approach. And you'd fly the GCA, and that's a long story in itself. And many times the airplane would hit the runway and you hadn't even seen it yet. You're lucky to see some runway lights go by. And then you stay on the heading indicator and hope you don't run off the side of it by the time you get it stopped. It was quite an experience.
I got to live 3 years in Alaska.
Oh, did you?
And flew a lot up there with helicopters, and probably some of the scariest moments in my life were landing in the wintertime and blowing snow.
Well, you know what it can be, that
Oh gosh.
it can get so bad you have zero visibility, absolutely nothing. And still you have to land. There's no other place to go.
Right. Have you been back to Whiteman Air Force Base?
Yes, I've been back there several times. We had one of our reunions there, the Air Force 340th Bomb Wing reunion. And they just absolutely rolled out the red carpet for us, and we really appreciated that. And we got to look at all the modern equipment we have now and sit in it and talk about it and ask questions and crawl over it and under it, anything we wanted to do.
And I imagine looking at some of the stealth technology and all the things that you got to see while you were there is pretty amazing.
Yes, it's pretty amazing, and we were kind of at the beginning of that technology when I was flying. For example, they'd have radar-absorbing paint on the bottom of the airplanes, and we were just kind of getting into stealth technology at that time. But I dearly loved it. And my wife was ill, and we had 2 little babies at that time. And flying as a pilot in the Air Force, you move about every 6 months. And I just didn't want to pull my kids out of school and put them in another school, and then out of that school into another school. I wanted them to go to one school, make lifelong friends, and graduate from that one school. And I felt my wife would have better medical care in civilian life, so I got out, and saddest day of my life when I drove through the main gate at Whiteman Air Force Base and had to go home and scrape the sticker off my windshield. But I had no problems with the Air Force. I loved it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. All I did was fly airplanes. And of course, we all know that the older you get in the Air Force or in any military service, you, instead of flying airplanes, you start flying a desk. And, but you still fly. And I'd have stayed for retirement plus, but I got out. I flew the Illinois Air National Guard out of Peoria here for a while.
Sure.
As a pilot. And then I flew corporate for 20 years, corporate aviation. And I really like that also because every day is different. There are no 2 days the same. You fly to O'Hare in Chicago, you fly to Memphis, fly to Atlanta. Every day is different. And I like that a lot.
Well, I will tell you that both these young ladies last year with the Illinois Air National Guard, they got to go up on a flight with them.
Good.
And we take our students up there once a year, and we go out to the airfield there, and they both got to experience flying in the back of a cargo aircraft for the first time, and they both really enjoyed it.
Great. Did they have the back door open?
I'm sorry, what did you
Do they
say?
have the back door open?
They
Yes.
opened it for a little while.
It gets a little drafty in there, doesn't it? Well, that's great. The C-130 is a wonderful airplane.
They enjoyed it.
At another Air Force reunion, we went through the plant where they make the C-130s, and also the Raptor, the F-21, I think it is. And the U.S. Air Force has stopped buying them now, and the ones they're manufacturing now are going to Israel. And they have great electronics in that thing. Wonderful. They'll do everything but milk the cows. So we put nose prints all over it. There was an Air Force colonel there that said it's one of the easiest airplanes he's ever flown. He said, your grandmother could fly it. Well, I don't think my grandmother would do very well, but it's a good thought.
So you told us that Russia was one of the worst wars. Do you want to talk about that more?
The Russian Cold War?
Yes.
Well, I've kind of hit the high spots on it. We lost 2 airplanes and another was all destroyed. It shot up with the MiG-17. And we spent the winter at Thule Air Force Base, and during the whiteouts, we'd have to tie a rope from one building to the next building and hang on to the rope to go from building to building. You probably had that experience.
Oh, yes.
Too. And it was hard duty. Temperature 70 below zero, and everything you did was very difficult. And we went out what they call station time. Station time is the time you arrive at the aircraft prior to the flight. And normally station time, like in the summertime, is an hour, maybe an hour and 30 minutes. Our station time at Thule was 5 hours. You're out in that 70 below zero temperature for 5 hours trying to get everything going in the airplane. We had 5 furnaces. We put one in each engine, one in the cabin. And you can put on all the clothes you own at once, and it's still not enough. The cold will eventually get to you. I froze my right thumb when I was up there and almost lost it, but it turned out really good, just like new again.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
I beg your pardon?
How did you readjust to civilian life?
Readjust to civilian life? Well, at first it was very difficult because I went to work for a company that had a large factory here in Peoria and eventually moved out, went to another town. And they had a number of factories around the United States. And so I was sitting at a desk doing what I considered mundane things. And when you're used to being out there and at 40,000 feet and doing things and flying and accomplishing things in the Air Force, and you know, the whole sky is your office, and when you get down to a little cubicle like that, I really felt hemmed in. But I get used to it. You get used to anything.
How many reunions have you been to?
How many what?
Reunions?
Oh my, I could hardly count them. I don't know, they've been going on for some time. There are 3 organizations that have reunions. The 340th Bomb Wing has a reunion every other year. And the B-47 Association has a reunion every other year. But they're staggered so that you actually have a reunion every year. And then they throw in a SAC reunion. We had a SAC reunion at Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha, Nebraska, last June. And I've never seen so many generals in my life at SAC headquarters. And SAC, you know, was shut down 25 years ago, and now SAC is back, bigger and better than ever. And at SAC headquarters, there are a lot of generals out there. But anyhow, there's 1 a year, and then sometimes there's 2 a year. And as long as I'm able to walk, I'm going to those reunions. It's really great to see the guys who we used to fly with and eat with and fight with, not fighting each other, but fighting the Russians. And they're absolutely priceless.
Do you have any favorite moments from the reunions?
Any what?
Favorite moments?
Favorite moments? I guess they were, you mean regarding the unions or the Air Force?
The reunions?
Yeah, it's getting together and picking up the fellowship where you left off. And the best part of the whole reunion starts about 10 o'clock in the evening when you sit around and tell war stories. But we do have rules. Any war story you tell has to be at least 10% true. And most of them are 100% true. But it's the fellowship, seeing the guys. Those friendships last the rest of your life. They never end.
Did you learn anything from the war? Like, from the experiences or basically everything that you went through, did you learn anything?
Did I learn anything from the war? One thing I learned, you can get killed that way. But outside of that, yes, I learned an awful lot about aviation. And matter of fact, I have a commercial pilot's license, and I still have it, and I'm still flying. And I've never had a private pilot's license. The first one I had was a commercial civilian license, and I got that through military proficiency. If you're proficient in the military, they just gave you your license. You take a short exam on regulations, and that was it. So,
What was your favorite plane to fly?
well, every plane I got into was my favorite. I'd fall in love with the F-80, and I thought this is the finest airplane in the world, and it wasn't bad. And then I went in B-47s, the B-47 Squadron, and I thought that is a wonderful airplane, but this is a long story, and this story could last hours, but the B-47 was the first attempt at swept-wing aircraft. And Boeing really didn't have a handle on it, and they made the wings so flexible that you'd lose control of the aircraft sometimes. Maybe you're familiar with the B-47.
A little bit.
And the wings were so flexible from sitting on the runway to liftoff, the wingtips would rise 17 feet. And the wing was so flexible it would not only bend this way, but it would bend this way. And that makes for an interesting ride. And I kind of forget now, but I think it's at 457 knots. You get control reversal. You try to turn right, it turns left. You try to turn left, it turns right. And as nearly as I can tell, when the right aileron would come up, it would push the back side of the wing down. The front end would come up and increase the angle of attack. You have the same thing on the other side in reverse. And then instead of turning right, the airplane turned left. It was, technically speaking, it was not a good airplane. But if you were really awake and really very, very careful with it, you could survive. We lost 6 of them right on takeoff. They'd take off and they'd roll over and go right into the ground. I don't think anybody ever figured out what caused that. But I saw one of them happen at Whiteman Air Force Base. That guy I knew, as a matter of fact, came off the runway, started climbing, rolled over, and went right into the ground upside down. All 6 of them were the same way. And you really had to be careful with that airplane. It would turn around and bite you. And it wouldn't be pleasant. And then they got into the Boeing 377, or the tanker, KC-97 we called it. And that was a wonderful airplane. You just couldn't kill the thing. You could fly it into the runway, you could manhandle it, you could abuse it, it would just keep right on going. And we had some interesting things happen. I won't take up too much time, but in the probably between 15 and 20,000 hours of pilot time that I have, I've only lost 3 engines. One was in an F-80. You only have one. And the turbine blades would actually grow with the tremendous heat and centrifugal force. With the metallurgy technology that we had then, they would actually grow and get bigger. And when they start to drag, it's all over. Because the blades just all break up, and you have something that looks like a whirling corn cob in there. You don't get much thrust out of that. And but the technology has really improved, and that doesn't happen anymore. But I had one come apart, and I was at 30,000 at night, and my way back to the base. And my first thought was, well, I'll ride it down to a lower altitude and bail out. And it was at night, about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, wait a minute, I've got one thing really going for me, and that's altitude. I was at 30,000 feet. And so I thought, just maybe I can make it back to the base. And those things glide like a cast iron frying pan. And I thought, just maybe I can make it. So I gave it a try. And I made it back to the base and had 500 feet to spare. One turn on a 360 overhead pattern. And when you make the final turn, you better have it figured out, because you only have one chance at it. And we lost 2 engines on a KC-97. We'd gone out to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and rendezvoused with the B-52 out there, offloaded fuel. And you save enough fuel to get home, of course, and headed back to Kansas City. The flight engineer, who's probably the most valuable guy in the crew, he does everything for you. You just tell him what power you want, and he gives it to you. And the pilot has the throttles for takeoff and landing, and that's about it. He has it the rest of the time. And so the flight engineer tapped us on the shoulder and said, we're showing a fire in number 1. Well, if there's anything you don't want in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, it's a fire in an airplane, because there's no place to go. And so we had 8 bottles of CO2, 4 in each main gear wheel well. We shot 4 bottles into that engine, and it did not put the fire out. So we shot the other 4 into it. It's 8 bottles of CO2, and we did get the fire out. But we were all through with that engine. And while the thing was burning, I would call the boom operator. He was acting as an observer in the back. And I'd ask him what color the smoke was. And if he'd always say, well, the smoke is black. Well, that's fine. It's burning oil, hoses, wires, stuff like that. Black smoke is not good, but it's better than white smoke. If the smoke turns white, you're burning the metal. And the main wing spar is right behind that engine. If you burn off the main wing spar, you better know the Lord, because you're going to meet him. And we survived that. We had that engine shut down, and we thought, well, we were light. We'd offloaded most of the fuel. So on 3 engines, 3 turning, we thought, well, that's no problem. And so then it wasn't another 15 minutes, and number 3 engine scattered and just came apart. And 90% of the time when an engine scatters like that, they'll catch fire. We had nothing to fight the fire with. Unfortunately, it did not catch fire, so we shut that engine down. And then we had number 2 engine and number 4. As much as I enjoyed flying, this flight wasn't so much fun anymore. And so we were pulling about 3,000 horsepower out of that one engine, and I started to wonder, how long is that thing going to last? And we had to greatly reduce power on number 4 engine because of the asymmetrical power, and want to fly around the circle all the time. So then you have both guys on the rudder trying to keep it straight. And so then I asked the navigator where the nearest land was that had an Air Force base on it, and that was Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. So we headed to Puerto Rico, and we got there. Called the squadron commander, told him we had a Boeing 377 down at Ramey Air Force Base, and Ramey was the country club of the Air Force. It may still be, I don't know, but they have golf courses and swimming pools, and it's really nice. So we didn't have anything to do the rest of the day. We were just in our flight gear, and so we went out and bought swimsuits and went to the beach. And we had a wonderful day, and the Colonel Thompson said, well, we'll bring 2 crated engines down in a flight tomorrow. And so we thought, okay, they were going to bring 2 engines down. I was thinking they'd drop them off. We'd wait till the airplane got repaired and then take it home. But it's not the way it turned out, because they brought the airplane down there, the Boeing 377 down there, and had 2 engines on it, 2 in crates. And the door opened after they landed, and out came 3 or 4 colonels and some light colonels and some majors, and I'm just a dumb kid off the farm, and I'm saying, what do we need all this brass to change 2 engines for? Come to find out they brought their swimsuits with them, and they brought their golf clubs with them, and they said, now you take our airplane home and we'll wait for yours. So they waited 2 weeks.
Some things never change.
It never changes. And so what do you say when the colonel says, you take this airplane back? You say, yes, sir. So we fired up. It was an old F model. The one we had was a G model, much nicer airplane. The F model was the older one, and it wasn't nearly as nice, and that's what they flew down. So we had to fire up and fly that one back to Whiteman. But our vacation
Cut short.
it got quite short. But there were a lot of fun things that happened in the Air Force. As I said before, I really enjoyed the Air Force. I have a dear friend, stay in contact with him all the time, that I flew with. His name is Gardner Rogers, the only Gardner Rogers in the United States. And he stayed with the Air Force and retired. He was a tanker pilot. He was a tanker pilot, KC-135. The rest of the time he was in the Air Force. And he retired and got into some kind of a medical supply business. Lives down in Palm Beach. And we call each other on the phone every month or something like that. And I get phone calls from all of these old friends of mine. We keep in touch by phone all the time. And it's just absolutely great. So that's what the reunions are all about. And as long as I'm still able to crawl, I'm going to the reunion. The next one is at next August, I think, and it's going to be at down in Missouri, Branson, Missouri. And that's at 340th Bomb Wing reunion. And we're still having a pretty good turnout. This time we had, in round numbers, about 150 plus spouses and friends and so on. So there's a lot of people there. We filled the ballroom in the hotel, and but we only have one problem. We're all getting old and dying off. And really, the group is getting smaller and smaller, and eventually it'll just disappear.
I'm going to ask at the beginning, but do you have any pictures or anything you would like to show us from your time being in the military?
Well, I've got a picture of the recent picture. Is Fighting Five. It's a